Did you ever wondered what the pros and cons are of NFTs? No? Okay then, never mind. In this video, we will obviously be talking about the benefits and the downsides of NFTs. We will be talking about whether or not you should invest in them or create them yourself, what the implications are of NFTs on the art world, on the art market. And when it comes to cryptocurrencies and NFTs, I've obviously invested in them myself. I even invested in Cardano all the way in the beginning, which is now the third market cap currency. And so that clearly was a good decision. And beyond that, a portion of my family comes from the banking world. My uncle developed DDAC International, which merged with Swift, and my other uncle has a real position in Swift. And for those of you who don't know, Swift is responsible for all the international bank transfers of all the major banks in the world. And so obviously during Christmas parties and stuff, we had some cryptocurrency discussions, which give me some inside info that you will not find online anywhere. Anyway, you don't need my whole family history, so let's just dive in right away. Let's first talk about the benefits. The first benefit that we are going to talk about is solving the problem of forgeries, which is huge. At this moment, it is by some even estimated that 50% of the art market would be fake. That would equal to over $30 billion a year being sold in fake art. I mean, this problem is huge. There's this one documentary that comes to mind. I will link it in the description, where there's an artist who is making fake art and then donating it to famous museums. And you would expect that because those museums are famous, that they would know the difference between fake art and real art. Turns out most of them accepted the fake art as real art and threw it in their collection. And so, I mean, this is a huge thing. Now, in order to understand how the blockchain solves this problem, we have to understand first how we are solving that today. Now, knowing if an artwork is real or not can be done through the provenance of an artwork, through finding its origins and its sales track record. Now, it turns out this is extremely hard. For this, auction houses have to go through all the transactions to find that proof of ownership and find those origins of that artwork. Now, that proof of ownership is just a piece of paper. And so if you've ever had to search for your car keys in your life or anything like that, it becomes very easy to understand that when you're dealing with a painting, let's say 500 years old, it's extremely hard to find that piece of paper after 500 years. And even if you find it, then you still have to authenticate it to be a real piece of paper. I mean, how do they do that? Now, NFTs on the blockchain solve this because on the blockchain, all transactions are recorded. And so if you, let's say after 200 years, want to know if an artwork is real, you just go back to the original transaction and see if the artist or a known art dealer has sold that particular piece on the blockchain. And that's it. That's all you have to do. And this would also not only solve the problem of fake art, it would also get rid of the huge overhead cost for auction houses, because authenticating art is just extremely expensive. Another benefit is that artists can ask for royalties on future sales. Now, the idea of royalties is nothing new. You've probably heard of it. And the first time that it was proposed is in 1917 in the Artists' Rights Agreement. And so in theory, this is already possible, but in practicality, it never happened. And I personally don't really know why and how. And so if you know, then please write it in the comment section. But my best guess is that it's just practically impossible. It's just not feasible to do this. If you're an individual artist, what are you going to do? You're going to track every future sale yourself and then ask for royalties through mail, through everything, potentially after you've died. So now you have to hire people after you're dead. I mean, it's just not something that you can reinforce. But with the blockchain and the coming of smart contracts, these contracts execute on those royalties automatically whenever a transaction happens. And so suddenly this becomes feasible. Now, the third benefit is obviously the preservation and conservation of our favorite color, namely like button blue, which is not only very similar to Bitcoin blue, but also helps a lot with the algorithm. So thanks a lot for pressing that like button. Let's go further. Another benefit is fractional ownership or shared ownership, which suggests that you would be able to have a part of an artwork. For example, you own 0.1% of a Picasso. Now, in theory, this is also possible in the real world today with regular contracts, but in practicality, this is just super hard because those contracts, that would be a very slow process. There would be a lot of parties involved, a lot of administrative costs and stuff like that. And so in reality, this never happens. But on the blockchain, all of this would happen automatically with smart contracts. And so this would mean that we, for the first time, would have expensive, famous art that becomes accessible for anyone, meaning it becomes a liquid asset that anyone can invest in. I mean, this is a Copernican shift in art investment, for sure. Now, a little side note here is that you have to be very careful when you're listening to people like me or other people talking about smart contracts, because smart contracts is kind of a deceptive choice of word. There's nothing smart about these smart contracts. In essence, it's just a piece of self-executing code that executes actions based on the parameters that you set for it. And so these actions can be good or wrong based on these parameters. And so there's nothing magical about smart contracts. The fifth benefit is simply getting paid. There are a lot of art galleries out there that are run by people who don't have a lot of experience with running an art gallery. Then they have to pay the bills, and guess what? They don't have enough money, and so they don't pay the artist at all, or pay them way too late, 6 months, a year later. And so these things happen way more than you would think. And with smart contracts, this would not happen, because the artist would get paid immediately when the transaction happens automatically. Another benefit is that if you choose to sell digital art as an NFT, preserving the authenticity of your artwork, then you are avoiding everything that has to do with shipping, the cost, the administration, and all of that stuff, making it much easier and cheaper for artists and buyers. And anything that makes the buying process easier will, of course, result in more sales. And so this is just a beneficial thing for art galleries, marketplaces, dealers, artists, collectors, etc., etc., etc. Another benefit is that the art might become more visible to the public, because here's the thing, a thing that not a lot of people know is that famous, expensive paintings, like for example the Mona Lisa, if you would want to transport that from one museum to another museum for a 1 month exhibition, then that would cost you in transportation fees and insurance fees $37 million. And so that is insane if you think about it. And because of that, these artworks are not flexible and don't travel a lot. And on top of that, most famous painting, most of the best art out there is hidden in warehouses. In free ports, as they call it. Now, obviously, there are many reasons for art to be stored in those free ports. Some reasons more legal than others. There's definitely some tax evasion going on and things like that. But they are hidden in those warehouses. And because the travel costs are so high, or partially because of those costs, they don't really go out of those warehouses. And as a result of that, we obviously don't see them. Now, with digital art and NFTs, there would be no transportation cost, and so all of that would fall away, which opens up some possibilities. Another benefit, I think we're at benefit number 9, we're almost done with the benefits, is the conservation aspect, because storing art in those warehouses is also expensive. Those warehouses need to be secure, fireproof, waterproof. The humidity and temperature levels need to be perfect. They need to be guarded and stuff like that. And so that's an expensive thing. With NFTs, digital art, that would all fall away. Let's talk about the cons. The first con is that it is not widely accepted yet in society, resulting in a lack of established value in your investment, which is a problem if you're dealing with investments like art, which typically are already on the risky side of investments. On top of that, it's also tech oriented, meaning that mainstream adoption is way less likely to happen than most crypto people want to admit. Here's the thing, if you want to operate in this space, you need to understand the space from a technological standpoint. And as harsh as it might sound, what I'm going to say next, that I don't want to be the privileged white guy on YouTube or anything like that, but I have to say it, and so I'm very sorry. But the truth is that 50% of the world has by definition an IQ that is lower than 100, and I don't see people with an IQ of 85 or people from less fortunate countries making the right decisions in this crypto space, which is filled with predators trying to take advantage of people, with pirates and things like that. And the crypto space is completely unregulated, meaning that if you get screwed, you can't really do anything about that. And I personally don't know how long it will take before laws get implemented and reinforced so that the space becomes safe for everyone to use, but I can imagine that it will take a pretty long time before this will happen. Another downside is that you could lose your wallet and your key fairly easily, and then you have a problem. If you in the regular world lose your bank card, for example, one phone call to the bank solves everything. On the blockchain, in the crypto world, losing your wallet, your crypto wallet, equals to losing everything, and there's nothing that can be done. Another problem arises when we look at where the NFT link is stored, because that link can also be lost. So in essence, an NFT is a token on the blockchain that is linked to an image of your artwork that is stored somewhere else, another website. But for some reason that website could go down, and so that link then gives you an error. It doesn't link to the artwork anymore because the website where the artwork is stored on doesn't exist. Now, this is a huge problem, and if you talk to artists, to NFT artists about this, they will say, well, it's not my problem, or somebody will solve it in the future, and obviously that is putting the responsibility on other people, which is never a good idea. Another problem arises when you want to link an NFT to a real artwork. In theory, you can tokenize anything, including a real artwork, and just create a link in the NFT to that real artwork. But some complications arise when you want to do this. First of all, how would you do this? How would you connect an NFT to something that is not existing on the internet? And even if you're able to do that, you still don't solve the problem, because one of the reasons that NFTs are so popular is that you can exchange them very rapidly, very quickly, and also from one part of the world all the way to another part of the world. You could, in theory, exchange an NFT 100 times in a couple of minutes. But when you want to attach a real artwork to that NFT, suddenly that becomes not possible anymore, because the real artwork cannot travel as fast. It's like hanging the heaviest bowling ball you can find to Usain Bolt. And so when you want to connect a real life artwork to an NFT, a lot of questions come to mind. How do you ensure that the artwork, the NFT, stays liquid? How do you link an NFT to a real life object? How is the ownership of that object going to exchange hands? Who is going to keep track of all the shipping and all of that stuff? Who is going to pay for that shipping? Because as we've seen, shipping can be extremely expensive. And how would you ensure that somebody doesn't sell the physical object separately from the NFT and then screws up the whole thing for the future? People who are selling real-life artworks as NFTs are basically duct taping their artworks to NFTs. And so it looks like for real-life artworks, NFTs are not really solving any of the problems except for the traceability of the artwork, which is kind of still a huge deal. And again, if you talk about this to artists, to marketplaces, dealers in the NFT space, they will or avoid the question or just say that somebody else will fix it for them. Then there's the energy problem. Without going too much detail, it costs an extreme amount of money in terms of energy bills to run a blockchain, and they solve this problem by charging a fee to the people who want to use the blockchain. On the Ethereum network, which is the one that is used most often for NFTs, they call this gas, which is ironic because it's similar to gas in real life. Just like in real life you would pay gas to transport something with your car, you also pay gas on the Ethereum network to transport something on that network. Now don't be mistaken, we are not talking about a couple of cents in gas fee, no. The gas fees are extremely high. They're calculated based on the complexity of the transaction, but even for very simple transactions it's still extremely high, and so this would make it difficult / impossible to sell very cheap objects, which is most objects in the world, on a blockchain like that. The fees are so high that you can ask yourself if this on itself will not already kill an otherwise amazing party that we would have with NFTs on the blockchain. Another downside is the whole internet fakeness thing. Now this is not necessarily connected to NFTs specifically. It has more to do with the whole internet or internet as a whole. But this is a problem. At this moment, you can just call yourself a New York art gallery when in reality you're living with 5 people in an apartment in New York and you're just selling some art of friends online. And so this is a huge difference with an actual art gallery in New York. It used to be the case that if you wanted to have an art gallery in New York 20 years ago, 30 years ago, then you needed to pay $30,000 in rent a month to have that gallery. So those authority aspects kind of get lost on the internet, and there's a lot more research that needs to be done to scan the art prior to buying it. Another problem in line with the whole internet fakeness is the problem of originality, because how can you prevent people from making an NFT and linking it to an object that they don't own or have the rights to? Because everybody is talking about how you can authenticate art easily with the blockchain, with NFTs, how you can go back to the provenance of an artwork, the first transaction, and all of that is true, but that doesn't mean that you cannot fake that first initial transaction. If I would copy an image of someone else and then sell it on the blockchain as an NFT, then nobody would know. I could even simply pretend to be the artist himself. And the artist would likely not know or know way too late. And even if he knows, then he probably doesn't have the funds to sue me. And even if he has the funds to sue me, there are no regulations to base your claims upon, and so suing becomes extremely hard. It's also international most of the time. I mean, this is a real struggle. You could solve this by, for example, only buying from legit and professional marketplaces that scan every art that they sell. And that would probably solve it until one of those marketplaces makes a human error, which they're bound to make, of course. And even if you have real art and a real artist, there are still a lot of problems that can occur. Let me give you an example of that. Best Supply is an artist that makes artworks that are almost copies of Banksy. They are so similar that people thought that this was the real Banksy making a statement by making a different persona, a fake persona, but actually selling the real Banksy. And so, ironically, this is also a very Banksy thing to do. And so, as a result of all of this, a lot of people started to believe that this was the real Banksy selling real work, resulting in an insane amount of people buying work from Best Supply. At this moment already for more than $900,000, that is not taking into account all the royalties and all of that stuff. Now, to be fair, Best Supply came forward by saying that he has nothing to do with Banksy, that he is not the real Banksy, but that's after already selling almost for $1 million worth of products. Now, is this fair or not? Well, most people will say that this is copyright infringement and not fair at all. And a lot of marketplaces also ban Best Supply already from selling his work on their marketplaces. But here's the thing, you can still sell it on other marketplaces. And there's also a big catch, because Banksy cannot really do anything about this. He could, of course, in theory sue, because this is clearly copyright infringement, but in practicality, first of all, there are no real rules around these digital art type of things. And second, Banksy also realizes that by suing Best Supply, hypothetically, more magazines would write about it, meaning more clicks, meaning more sales for Best Supply. And so, ironically, doing something about this would be worse or better for Best Supply, and so worse for Banksy than doing nothing about this at all. Now, in order to make this video complete, we should be talking about the whole NFT hype that is going on right now. Why all these billionaires like Mark Cuban, Elon Musk are massively investing in NFTs, and why these NFT artworks went from being worth a couple of $100 to being worth tens of thousands of dollars in a matter of months. But that would be a completely different video and another 10 minutes. And so I'm very sorry, but we're not going to do that. Predominantly because I already did. It's called Why Billionaires Are Investing in Crypto Art NFT. You could be watching it. My name is Dries Ketels, and if you're interested in the business side of the art, I will probably see you again.